Hello there, and welcome to our first webinar in the Aquaculture Expert Series, brought to you by BIOMIN. My name is Benedict Standen, Global Product Manager for Aqua, and I will be moderating today's session. To cover the very important topic of disease mitigation in shrimp, utilizing a holistic approach, I am joined by our featured expert, Dr. Prakan Chiarahkhongman, Vice President of Aquatic Animal Healthcare Products, Specialist and Service Provider at CP Group. Dr. Prakan, thank you very much for joining us today. Before we start the presentation, I'd like to speak directly to our live audience. This is an interactive webinar, which means two things. Firstly, as a participant, you can enter questions for Dr. Prakan using the chat function in your window, and we will try and get around to as many as time permits at the end of the session during the Q&A time. Secondly, we will also be asking you, the live listeners, a couple of poll questions where you can pick an answer which best reflects your current scenario. And these may provide basis for further discussions as we go through the webinar. These answers are also completely anonymous. So, Dr. Prakan, thanks again for joining us today. We're all very excited to hear what you have to say, so please feel free to start your presentation.
Thank you, Benedict. Thank you, Benedict. And first of all, I would like to thank you for BIOMIN for inviting me to share information that CPF had done many things regarding shrimp farming. And my topic today that I have been assigned to speak is about disease mitigation in shrimp, a holistic approach 2020. I'm going to try to use maybe 45 minutes to let you understand whatever we have done in shrimp farming around the world together within Thailand and many countries. So this is just the important diseases that maybe you have faced in many countries around the world, especially in Asian. Important shrimp diseases has been challenged by white spot, EHP, white feces syndrome, APEN or EMS, infectious myonecrosis virus in Indonesia, and HIV in China. So all of these is just the most important diseases. The watching list for us is IMNV and HIV. That is the most dangerous diseases that we have to be careful. So I'm going to start with the first diseases. I'm talking about white spot and white HV infection. This picture going to show you that the most devastating diseases still be viral infection in shrimp, both of white spot and white HV still being the most important diseases because they kill the shrimp within not more than 24 to 48 hours. So you can have to see that this is the table of white spot biocarrier and biovector, including the zooplankton. So you can see that this information, you can find out that many biocarrier has been found in the pond, and then they have more than 100 species of white spot biocarrier and biovector in the environment of shrimp farming. So you have to be aware and careful when you culture shrimp together with all kinds of these animals. So I'm going to mention something about the crab, because the crab, they can survive for so long. The information is crab can survive more than 90 days, even they have white spot infection inside the body of the crab. And the crab, they have one thing that they can find infected, but they don't have any apoptosis. It means that the program cell death of the crab is very less. But if you expose the crab to the shrimp within not more than 3 to 5 days, you can see in the table, many shrimp gonna die within not more than 5 days to 7 days. And then this is why the crab is the most dangerous. If you stock this shrimp and together with the crab that contaminated with white spot, then the shrimp is going to be die very fast. Another thing about the white spot is about the bird. This is the bird and biovector and biocarrier. So you can see that Escherichia and Tola syndrome virus has been found in bird feces, but they can possibly to be the viral transmission. But bird digestive enzyme, they can inhibit the growth of the white spot and white HV. So it's very rare case that white spot can be capable for the transmission of the white spot to any other pond. So when you are going to control white spot, you have to consider about many things, right? Farm location, density of the farm nearby you, migrating period of the birds, the population increasing of the bird, together with biosecurity have to be implemented. Most important thing about the infection or white spot transmission from the bird is the birds going to consume or feeding on the dead and dying pond and spread them over the other pond. That is why it's going to be the biggest source of infection if you have birds surrounding your shrimp pond. So this video going to show you about migrate birds over the winter season. You can see that a lot of birds that come from China, especially during winter, they are going to bring many diseases. And if they carry some dead specimen, or even they eat some dead shrimp and spit or splat the specimen from the bird over the net, you are going to be careful when you have shrimp farming and you don't have the biosecurity. In the picture, you can see that many shrimp farmers, especially Thailand, we're doing the cover net, even the bird scaring device and crab fencing to prevent the bird and the crab not to come inside the farm. This is another information that is very interesting. They have some study in Philippines in 2012. You can see that monsoon season, they increase the prevalence of white spot to be 100% more than normal conditions of weather. It's because the fluctuation of the pH, dissolved oxygen, and total ammonia nitrogen, and especially temperature that play low for white spot to be propagated. Another slide, you can see that during 32 degrees Celsius, has a long gap lethal time of white spot to be outbreak and kill the shrimp. They take more than 14 days. But if you have less temperature like 16 to 28 degrees Celsius, the lethal time of white spot can be shorter at only 7 days. The shrimp going to die when you expose this low temperature and white spot is in the water. So that is why CPF, we introduced the 3C holistic approach, which means that you need to consider about the clean seed, clean water, and clean pond, together with the strictly of biosecurity, as you can see in the picture. This was run, the picture had been captured from the farm in Philippines. You can see that they have a physical precaution. That is mean bird scaring device had been installed, crab fencing, and on chemical precaution like disinfection bath, or even you have to implement the biological precaution. That is mean the clean seed have to be purchased from the trustworthy hatchery to be one thing that make your shrimp farm to be success with the shrimp farming. Happen is another diseases that happen during the drought, and this year drought 2020 going to be a big problem because in this drought and in the summer season they are going to have very high salinity together with the high temperature, and because Happen Vibrio Parasiticus Happen bacteria, they relate to a very dirty environment and high organic load. Low dissolved oxygen and plankton boom like this is going to cause the problem of bacteria to be overbloom. You can see that this is the video showing the shrimp eating the biofilm together with the bacteria. So when they eat the biofilm and the bacteria, the Vibrio Parasiticus that have the Happen toxin, they are going to colonize the stomach area. And then when the stomach area has been colonized by the bacteria, the toxin named PIRAB toxins going to release from the stomach to the hepatopancreas. That is why a lot of shrimp will be die when they eat some dirty environment like the biofilm and the bacteria that is covered together at the corner of the pond if you don't clean them enough. I think, Ben, you are going to have some poll.
Yeah, may I interrupt you, Dr. Prakan, at this point to open our first poll for the live audience. You've done a very good job at introducing some viral pathogens and Vibrio as a bacterial pathogen. So this is where I'd like to ask the first question. So the first question to the audience is, what is the main disease threat which you are facing in your region? Please select one, and the options would be bacteria, virus, parasite, or a co-infection. You wait maybe 10 more seconds just to get some more people to vote. We've got some answers coming in now. Okay, so I'll close the poll now, and I will share with you the results. So for your information, Dr. Prakan, 28% of the audience said that bacterial pathogens were the main disease threat. 47% said viruses, 5% said parasites, and 21% are facing problems with multiple pathogens as a co-infection. So can I ask what your comments would be in this, and is it what you would anticipate with your experience in the field?
Fantastic poll that you had done from BIOMIN. It just relates to whatever we done in Thailand also. The most problem that we face in Thailand is related to white spot or the viral infection, still being to be the one important disease that we have to, be careful, because most of the farmer, they maybe they weakening about the biosecurity. So white spot or viral infection or any other viral infection is the most important that we have to pay attention. Of course, bacteria another second one, because now in drought season, or the climate change and temperature going up, the bacteria is overboom very fast. That is why if you have the environment of the water is not good enough, especially the dissolved organic carbon on any other that I'm going to tell you more in this slide, you are going to face a lot of problems about the bacteria. So, well, I'm going to talk you more about this one.
Absolutely.
May I continue?
Please continue. Thank you.
Okay. That is why the second poll that I just have from Benedict is about the problem of the apple or the bacteria still being the second most important diseases. You can see it in this slide that in drought, in summer season, you can see the bacteria going to be increased, especially Vibrio paralymphicus and the turbid or dissolved organic carbon also, and temperature and salinity, all of them pay low in terms of to make the bacteria to be overbloom. That is why when you have this environment, especially this year, you are going to face a lot of problem about bacterial infection. So as I told you about CPF, we launched 3C concept, holistic approach, that is have 3 rules about clean seed, clean water, and clean pond. Rule number 1 is the clean seed. What does clean seed mean? Clean seed means the clean seed, the seed had to be selected and have to be from the disease free, and disease has to be screened out from the broodstock, especially in the PL. So it have to come from the trustworthy hatchery, because seeds is very important. And if you can have the good quality seeds, especially if you have the extension work of the nursery pond, nursery tank or nursery cages pond before you stock in the go out, is going to be very good for this one. So I'm going to give you the example of CPF high quality clean seed. We keep them quality control throughout the system of the broodstock and the hatchery and the nursery process. And diseases have to be screened out, especially most important diseases like apple, ESP, ISSNV, Tora syndrome, white spot, and any other diseases that concern in any other country. And the seed have to be disease tolerant and resistant strain selection, and high survival rate, uniform size, and fast growing. And all of this is the most important that we mentioned about clean seed or good quality clean seed. Well, not just only the clean seed. I just would like to tell you that this is a CPF research center in Thailand. Had been done some challenges test of the Vibrio paralymphicus together with the size of the PL. And we found out that if you have the bigger size of the PL that we call juvenile shrimp, we are going to get higher survival when you expose them to the bacterial infection, especially Vibrio paralymphicus apple. So you can see that juvenile shrimp that bigger than 1.5 to 2 grams, we found that they have more tolerance to the apple. This is just the research that we done in CPF Thailand. That's why we just launched the concept. If you can stock a big size of animal, especially the juvenile one, or you can nurse them in in your extension of nursery is going to be the benefit. And this is just the picture and the video to show you the CPF nursery extension in some country, like in Philippines. You can see that most of them, they don't stock PL directly into the pond, but they just nurse them in nursery extension, because they just think that when they have some bigger juvenile, they are going to be tolerant to many diseases, both EHP and Appan bacterial infection. And of course, in good strain or the broodstock, you can get compensatory growth, and this can be done within 30 days. You can reach maybe 1 or 2 grams within 30 days of this nursery process. It can be very good thing that you can just use this technique in your farm. I'm going to mention a little bit about the COVID that affect to the shrimp farming. You can see that this is a table of the regular harvesting calendar that just many countries that have here in the slide. I just take this one for the seafood trip, that you can see that many countries like India, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Ecuador, they have just have the pattern of the harvesting calendar in different months. But because this year, unluckily, they have some problem of the COVID. The lockdown already happened in China or many countries around the world during February. Social distancing and import, export already strict during that time. So you can see that during that panic from the February month, many shrimp farmers already harvest the shrimp from March, April, May and June. Many of shrimp already harvest because they panic about the price of the shrimp. Some experts say that the shrimp still left in the system in many countries less than 30 to 40% because they panic about the price, and then they try to harvest shrimp because they scared that the shrimp going to get very low price if they still have shrimp in the pond. But if this scenario happen, you can see that during July, August, and September, especially October, they are going to have the chance that they are going to lack of the shrimp production in the world, because many countries already, harvesting the shrimp, only maybe 30 or 40% of shrimp still left in the system. So the price still fluctuation. Only some country like Ecuador in Guayaquil that still harvest shrimp during this period of time. So it means that something you need to be beware and you need to be careful is about the September, October, and November is going to be second and third harvesting season of many countries. That price may be going to be fluctuate during this period of time, or weakening if you still have shrimp that going to be harvested in that period of time. You still have to be careful. And because of the COVID, you can see that there are crises, and China is the first country who show the crisis of this one. You can see that the seafood import to China is dropped more than 100%. Not just only the seafood product, mainly of the broodstock, and that they import to the China already just stopped import during the April to March and even some February months of this year. So you can see that during this period when they have crisis, import less strict to China country. They use their own pond rare broodstock to be used at the broodstock. So when they produce the PL by the pond base or pond rare broodstock, they present the higher risks of carry many diseases in the big country. China is the one that have the problem. You can see that this is a problem with the production of China, that they already have disease outbreak since 2015. You can see that the production of many areas of China already decreasing. In Guangdong, Fujian, Jiangsu, or Guangxi, or many areas of China have very low production since 2015 to 2018. And this just another thing that when COVID happened in February, you can see that there are lockdown and social distancing already implemented there. You can see that they use the pond rare as a broodstock, and this is going to be introduce a lot of problem to many countries that they try to implement the pond rare as a broodstock and has been produced the PL to be used in their country. Due to the COVID crisis and social distancing with the lockdown, you can see that the pond layer non-SPF broodstock has been used in many countries, especially China and India. And this is going to be one thing that introduce unknown disease to aquaculture system. So pathogen will be exposed to the pond layer broodstock, and they may carry unknown diseases. That's going to be something that we have to be careful when we are going to use this kind of PL to stock in our shrimp pond. So you can see the information of Guangdong. This year in 2020, they report DIV1 virus has been detected in Guangdong, and many areas from the April 2020, they have many diseases. And from the sample of 209 sample correct in Guangdong, you can see many diseases there. White spot going to show there 3%, IHSNV 1%, ESP 18%, BIV1 is 17%, and unknown or unidentified diseases allow 61%. So this is going to be one important if we use the broodstock that is not clean enough to produce the PL. The big problem going to happen with our shrimp farming. This is going to be an example in India. You can see that in India, when they have a lockdown or social distancing, 68 broodstock has been suspended. 68,000 broodstock had been suspended. 4 and 5 billion seeds had been drained out because they don't have anyone purchase them to stock into the pond. So they have some expert, Manoj Sharma, they just report this year maybe the production of the India will be dropped nearly 50% because the farmer they are locked down problem and they don't have any pond aid or pond worker to work in the farm together with very less seed and very low quality seed happen in the country because they use a pond layer alternative. Broodstock has been used and unknown diseases will be happen. This is going to be one slide showing you about the Q1 until the April amid the COVID 2020 and India export. You can see that they have export less than 25 to 27 compared to the 2019. So India gonna be another big country that face a lot of problem about the shrimp export and shrimp production. Rule number 2 that CPF already done into the holistic approach is the clean water. Clean water is mean physically, chemically, and biologically of the aspect of the water preparation have to be concerned. You can see that in the picture, we have done physically protection our water from the contamination from the disease causative agent or risky factor. All of these have to be reminded that if you have the clean water and you can eliminate all of the dissolved organic carbon and all of the total solid suspension in the water is going to be safe for your shrimp to be survive in the environment. This is just another concept of CPF clean water in Vietnam. You can see that they use concept of precipitation or water purification process. When they had done some precipitation process, you can see that total solid suspension can be settled down into the bottom, and NTU or net flow turbidity units can be as lower as 2. It means that water will be clean enough to be cultured. This clean water is very necessary for shrimp farming in this period when you have a lot of diseases surrounding you. Many farmers use chlorine, and you have to know that chlorine, the most important thing that play role with the chlorine is about the pH. When the pH of the water is decreasing, the hypochlorous acid will be decreasing dramatically. When you see in the slide that hypochlorous acid in the blue color will be decreasing when the pH is just increasing. So it means that when you have increasing the pH, hypochlorous acid or the chlorine will be fade away or degrading from the pond very fast. That is why after you use the chlorine for not more than 24-48 hours, and if you prepare the water for as long as maybe 7 days, you can see that the VBO, especially VBO or the overbloom of the plankton, will be coming back when the chlorine has been degraded. This slide going to show you another thing. When you have the disinfection like chlorine dioxide and the owls after you inoculate into the pond and the bacteria growth, especially the Vibrio, you can see that within not more than 24 hours after you inoculate the chlorine dioxide into the pond, the bacteria number from 10 power 5 can be increased to be 10 power 5 and 10 power 8 and 9 and 10, depend on the doses of chlorine dioxide that you introduce into the pond, because the degrade of the chlorine dioxide that happen when you apply this one into the shrimp pond. So when chlorine is gone, the bacteria is coming back. You can see that when you just clean the water by using precipitation concept or using the disinfection, and you bring the water to be checked, you can find the green colony and yellow colony happen in that, like in the slide, and that is why the bacteria is already covered into your pond and make some problem with your shrimp. Well, one thing that you have to understand is you need to understand the role of the shrimp gut microbiome in the health and the diseases. Well, the bacteria, especially Vibrio, not always to become the pathogenic Vibrio all the time. They have some paper mentioned about the pathogenic and non-pathogenic Vibrio species in aquaculture system. You can see that some non-pathogen Vibrio can be found inside the intestine, especially the GI tract of the shrimp. But because the salinity and temperature and dissolved organic carbon and shrimp stress that may play role to make these VBO to be virulent, because they are going to be something that activate the virulent factor of the VBO. That's why normally VBO maybe they don't always to become the pathogenic ones. But when you change something like salinity, temperature, dissolved organic carbon, or even you stress them, they are going to activate something to the Vibrio, and then the virulent factor will become, and then that you can see that the Vibrio can turn into be pathogenic and cause some problem to your shrimp. I just show you this table about some certain environment in lower salinity and lower salt and lower temperature. You can see that normal Vibrio still be there, many Vibrio still not harmful to the shrimp. They can be normal flora with Vibrio and can be found, and then they do nothing with the shrimp. You can find some very few of Vibrio that colonize to the intestine or the GI tract of the shrimp. But whenever you activate them by you just stimulate the virulent factor, or even you propagate them by you stimulate some environment factor. For example, you activate them or stimulate dissolved organic carbon or the temperature, the propagation of Vibrio will be there, and that's why you can see many Vibrio is increasing, and they are going to colonize the stomach area or the GI tract of the shrimp and cause a lot of problem. This is going to be another one slide that's going to show you about the intake canal that without shrimp, and we check the Vibrio. For Vibrio counting of day of culture around 30 days, 72 days until 95 days, you can say that in intake canal without the shrimp, the Vibrio will be fluctuate a little bit, but not more than 400 CFU per ml. But in the meantime, if you have a control pond with the shrimp, you can see that the Vibrio number will be increasing. And in the meantime, in the other pond that they have done bio-augmentation or probiotic inoculation in the pond number 1 and number 3 that they inoculate probiotic, you can see that they can just submit or they can just exhibit the inhibit the growth of the Vibrio in the pond that they use the probiotic farming. That is why competitive exclusion from the probiotics or bio-augmentation is useful whenever you do the clean water, and you may have to consider that a biological control by the probiotic or bio-augmentation is useful for you to implement after you disinfect your water with chlorine or even the potassium permanganate. This is just another slide to show you about our research in Thailand. We done the CPF microbiome metagenomic studying on each shrimp culture, and in different kind of culture system. You can see that the shrimp that culture in RIS, in water exchange, in biofloc or even in recycle system, they have different in microbiome or different in the bacteria profile and distribution. That is why we can say that the performance of shrimp is related to microbiome that different in the pond. The system that you introduce, if you never consider about to balancing the microbiome or the diversity of the bacteria into the pond, then the production of your farm will be fluctuate. The other diseases that I'm just would like to let you know is about the ESP or enterocytosome hepatopenii that just relate to the problem of the white feces syndrome. This is the picture to show you about the ESP or enterocytosome parasite or microsporidium, or now we can categorize them as the fungus and the slow growth of the shrimp together with very size variation and very high FCR and low ADG of the shrimp that happen. So you can see that ESP can be the serious emaciative diseases in shrimp culture, and around the world have this problem. You can see that when you have ESP that is infected by spore injection, the volatile into the cell of the shrimp, especially epithelium cell, the spore is going to be convert to be plasmodium cell, and then they are going to grow inside the cell. And after that, when the cell is already exposed, spore is going to be suspended in the turbid water. Like in this video, you can see that turbid water and shrimp, they are together. And the more you give the shrimp to consume the spore, the more they are going to consume a lot of ESP. When you leave the shrimp in turbid water like this, they have a lot of ESP environment because ESP is released from the shrimp. So in this time, if you leave them for more than 2 or 3 weeks, incubation periods have been reported from some scientists that the shrimp going to show sign of size variation or slow growth when you leave this kind of environment to be happen into your shrimp farm. And this information is very interesting. I got from many countries. You can see that in Philippines, they have surveillance program. In 2017, they have some ESP allowed 5%. In Thailand, it's allowed 60% in 2019. In India, in West Bengal, in 2018, it allowed 85%. And in Jiangsu, in China, in 2019, it's allowed 93% ESP. So you can see ESP is everywhere around the world, not just only in Asian countries. In LATAM or Latin America, it's already reported they have some ESP also. This is just another information that I just would like to let you know. You can see that our CP in India, we set the laboratory everywhere in the very important province. And you can see that in Bhimavaram province, in Andhra Pradesh, and then we just check about the prevalence of the EHP in the post-larvae and in the juvenile, in the soil, and in the water. You can see that the ESP going to jump from the PL to juvenile more than 2,000%. Why this happen is because when you have the clean seeds, but if you stock in very dirty environment, for example, you have ESP in the soil, in the water, you are going to see that the chance of the clean seed that going to be infected by ESP going to be very fast because ESP is everywhere right now, as I show you in the last slide. So you can see this environment in India. You can see that we found ESP spore 10 power 3 or 10 power 4 copy per microliter of the soil in the environment. So you can see that the black soil, or even if you use a wet pond or repeated pond without the drying concept, or you always disturb the pond and you never remove the sludge or you never remove the waste out from the environment, you are going to still have the persistence of the ESP problem. And this is just the slide to show you about the relationship between the white feces syndrome and the ESP. You can see that the ESP always have the prevalence inside the white feces syndrome around 96%. This is a report from Rajendran that report in 2016. You can see that the white feces syndrome, they have very important that the prevalence of ESP inside them is a lot. So you can see that these diseases is always just very related to each other. And this as same as our report in our internal laboratory in Marine Shrimp Stock Research Center. Sutham Chuma in our CPF Research Center in Thailand, he just introduced the shrimp with many kind of the cocktail of the bacteria and ESP together with the bad environment. And he can introduce the shrimp and they can just demonstrate the white feces to be happen. He just introduced the shrimp to get ESP together with the set of the bacteria, especially anaerobic bacteria. And the nitrite level is around 10 to 20 ppm together with very low dissolved oxygen. You can see that he can introduce the gut of the shrimp to turn to be white color, and finally they can have the white feces that just demonstrate in the laboratory. So the most important when you want to fighting with the white feces syndrome, the most important you have to understand is the anaerobic condition. The anaerobic condition that happen, they have many reports that they cause white feces syndrome to be happen, especially the anaerobic at night owls. You can see in the slide that sometimes you have very good dissolved oxygen in the daytime, but in the nighttime, in the bottom area, maybe you have the dissolved oxygen less than 1. That is why anaerobic condition will be introduced, and that is called hydrogen sulfide to be released. And that is why white feces still happen. Many areas, if you have this problem and you cannot eliminate anaerobic condition or cannot eliminate anaerobic zone, the problem of white feces still persisted. Rule number 3 is clean pond and clean bottom. So this is the most important, that you need to remove the waste, especially the sludge that accumulate into the center of the pond, and you have to regularly remove them out by use the concept of centralization. So you need something to centralize the waste to be in the center, and you need a toilet or shrimp toilet area to just accumulate them, and regularly you need to have a flushing machine to remove them and keep them in the sludge pond. So sludge have to be in sludge pond, while the effluent of the shrimp pond have to be turned out and keep in the ETP or effluent treatment plant to be clean and then to be treated and then can be used as a recycle aquaculture system later. So this is just a clean concept of the pond. You can see that we still have to use a shrimp toilet, and also we still have to use a centralize the pond by the long arm aerator together with a sludge removal, and then you have to regularly remove them and keep them in the sludge pond. You can see that this is a slide to show you appropriate the toilet area together with sludge area that they sacrifice to keep the sludge, not to be just pumping the sludge into the natural resources that can be harmful for you later. This is just to be an example that you need to be beware and set up your layout farm to be appropriate to just culture your shrimp. Clean pond is mean you need to have a good pond preparation protocol. This is just a picture to show you about the farmer in India. They just check the black soil, they're poaching the wet pond, they dry them, and then they burn slime them. Not just only the earthen pond, some pond that have PE lining, you can see that they still have to clean the pond, especially under the PE, or even on the surface of the PE. You have to remove the biofilm and the ESP spore, because this is going to be the big problem. If you culture shrimp with the spore and apple bacteria, is going to cause a lot of problem to you. And one thing that you have heard a lot over the information, the technical information about the pH, that you can see that if you can increase the pH to be above 10 and spore, they are going to shooting the polar tilt, and then they say that the scientists like Dr. Kalaya and Tim Fagel, they say that after 15 minutes, after they shooting the polar tilt, the spore is going to die. So it means that if you are during the pond preparation, if you can use the burn slime or some material that increase the alkaline condition of the pond to make the spore that maybe still persisted in the pond environment to be shooting the spore, the pond will be safe, and then slow growth and high CV problem and loose shell by the EHP will be lesser. So this is environment when you leave the shrimp in the dirty environment. You can see that the shrimp going to eat some spore in the bottom, especially in the corner of the pond. So they have some question that why we have to leave the shrimp in the deteriorated environment for such a long period of time. So that is why in CPF Vietnam, they introduced CPF combined model second version. So it means the shrimp going to be stocked in the tank that is going to be less water exchange, less water use, and it's going to be controllable system. And then they can clean the tank very fast and then easy to clean and no deteriorate bottom because they are not going to stock the shrimp in the tank in the pond anymore. The shrimp will be stocked in the series of multiple continuous tanks. So it means the shrimp will be moved away every 1 month. So when shrimp can be movable every month, they don't have to be in the deteriorated environment. And that is why CPF combined model second version is very successful in Vietnam country right now. You can see this is the information of the rotation of the tank. They stock the shrimp within not more than 1 month, and then they rotate them within the tanks. So they can clean the pond very fast. They can keep a lot of oxygen. So oxygen level will be there, and you can see that the shrimp performance there is still very good. So I'm going to let you know this one gonna be the most important. In Thailand, we consider that in the future, the recycled aquaculture system have to be considered and introduced to your shrimp farm. You can see this is a sample of the Pok Klong farm in Krabi province in Thailand. They sacrifice many areas in the center as in the video to be the area to keep the water and recycle to be used. So you can see that this is going to be the future to sustainable of shrimp farming. If you can sacrifice some of your prawn to keep the water, to treat the water, or even to recycle the water, it's going to be good for the environment in the future and going to be to sustainable shrimp farming in the future also. I think Benedict, you are going to start any second poll.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Dr. Prakan. I'd like to use this opportunity to open the second poll question. So the second poll question should be sharing with you right now. And the question is, how do you currently manage the disease challenge? So what is the primary method that you will be utilizing? Is it one with biosecurity, through water management, through feed additives, or through a holistic approach? Please select the one that best suits your current management style. And we will wait 10 more seconds just while we get some more feedback. Okay, then I think we can close this poll and I will share with you the results. So here we have the feedback. So Dr. Prakan here, 24% of our audience is using biosecurity as the main disease prevention method. 30% are focusing on water management, 9% on feed additives, and 37% utilizing a holistic approach.
Yes.
So this would mean that the majority, or more than half, or more than 60% of our audience are not currently using a holistic approach. What is the main message that you would send our audience today, bearing in mind your presentation is encouraging people to use this holistic approach?
Yes, from my experience, as I explained to you, the most important about shrimp farming, you have to understand that they have many aspects that play role in terms of the success for the shrimp farming. So in my personal idea, I think holistic approach that I already just introduced to you, you have to think about maybe the quality of the seed, the biosecurity, of course, is the most important, the water aspect, and the pond bottom aspect. All of these had to be combined together to make your shrimp farming to be success. That is just my main message that I think all of you have to be considered.
I would agree, and hopefully after the presentation, then a lot more than 37% will be using the holistic approach. Thank you, Dr.
Very much.
Prakan.
Okay, I'm going to start my presentation. So as I told you that many of shrimp farm in Thailand, we are going to introduce the, recycle aquaculture system. And one thing that we use to recycle water, it means we need something to just trap in the nitrogen waste or the nitrogen removed from the water. Of course, sludge have to be in the sludge pond, but effluent that you are going to recycle to be used, some concept of surface flow hybrid construction wetland has been used. And you may just wondering that many of the wetland, for example, the sponge type of the plant, like cattail or the sedges, is already implemented to be used in shrimp farm, and it's very successful to remove the nitrogen waste out, and the water or effluent water can be done to be used and recycled to be safe for your shrimp farm. So this is just an example of the shrimp farming in Thailand. You can see that many of shrimp farm have the culture pond, they have the ETP or effluent treatment plant, they have a sludge pond, and of course they have a wetland to just maybe just trap in the nitrogen waste from the effluent of the shrimp pond. They have a recycled water, and of course they are going to be environmental friendly. So you can see that this is going to be one thing that environmental concern. Shrimp farming is increasing in Thailand and has been introduced to many farmers to understand that if you can separate the waste, especially sludge or solid waste, to be in the sludge pond and effluent, to be circulated, to be in effluent treatment plant or ETP, and you can use like sponge type plant to trap in the nitrogen waste together with many treatment, you can recycle water to be used and it can be safe for your shrimp. So you can see that during the last couple of months, they have the last report of DIV report in many countries. And Guangdong in China is it's just an example of one country. And China shrimp farmer already terrified about deadly virus of this one, not just only China. In Taiwan also, in July 2020, they have some report about this deadly virus in Taiwan. I'm going to show you about the history of DIV and HHIV and CQIV. So you can see that iridescent virus or ilidovirus, it happened in 2014 first in Chilac quadricalennatus or blue claw shrimp in Fujian province in China in 2014. So that time the scientists keep the name of this ilidovirus as CQIV, or they come from Chilac quadricalennatus iridescent virus. So in 2017, HHIV or iridescent virus, it attacked the venomous shrimp and 100% mortality in 2017 in this Xinjiang province in China. So at that time, scientists keep the name of this iridescent as HHIV or shrimp hemocyte iridescent virus. So in 2018, they have another iridescent virus in Mecobranchium rosenbergii, 80% mortality. So in this, they happen in Jiangsu. So in 2018, they keep the name at DIV1. So you can see that they have many iridescent virus name happen in the China. So to avoid confusing maybe happen, the Executive Committee of International Committee on Taxonomy of the Virus had concluded to group all of ilidovirus that happen in decapod animal to be at the same name and being called DIV1. So now if you have iridescent virus or ilidovirus happen in decapod animal, we are going to call them DIV1. So DIV1 and HHIV and CQIV is the same virus. And why this one is the most important? Because you can see that the mortality of DIV1 is very dangerous. They have some scientists in China, they just run the research in 2016 about this virus exposed to the blue claw and red claw shrimp and venomous. You can see that within not more than 20 days, the shrimp, all of them going to dry 100%. And the fastest of 3 days has been reported in Guangdong City. The shrimp die only 3 days when you have this DIV exposed into your environment. Another important thing I would like to inform you, they have some research surveillance program that has been done in Indian Ocean Sea. The disease surveillance program has been done in Indian Ocean Sea from C. Sala et al. In 2020. They found that wild-caught broodstock, especially monodon wild-caught broodstock, they carry the IV1 and HHIV, and some of them carry IMNV since 2018. So it means that if you use the wild-caught broodstock or the broodstock that you come from the pond laying broodstock without the SPF program, we have a chance to get these diseases because the diseases is everywhere. You can see that not just only broodstock, they have many reports that some untrustworthy live feed or the broodstock, especially the bloodworm and polychaete or the squid or the krill that import from contaminated area, they always have some carry of DIV and HHIV. So if you give all of these to the animal, they can transmit or vertical transmission from the disease from the broodstock to the PL, and that's going to be the nightmare if you give all of these to the broodstock, that maybe you have SPF broodstock, but untrustworthy live feed, not PCR screening, is going to be something that bad for the situation. So you have to PCR your live feed to make sure that they don't carry any diseases to your broodstock. So take home message before I finish. I'm going to let you know that, of course, holistic approach that I already emphasized is very important for disease mitigation. And CPF already launching this one in many countries. Clean seed, clean water, and clean pond is the meaning of holistic approach that we introduce to many other countries around the world. Extension of nursery may be useful. So if you have extension of nursery to get a juvenile one, you can see that the shrimp is going to be stronger and bigger. So if you have this extension of the nursery in your grow out farm, and you can make them strengthen them to be bigger, then it's going to be good for them to tolerate to many diseases. Biosecurity programs have to be strict implemented to avoid many viral infections. As I emphasize, biosecurity is comprised of physical, chemical, and biological precaution measures. And of course, environmental concern and responsibility have to be considered. So in many areas, they introduce the concept of recycle or recirculating aquaculture system. And of course, you need to design and you need to plan to set your layout of shrimp farm to have a slot pond, toilet area, and ETP. And then, of course, you can recycle the water to be used. And of course, you can avoid environmental deterioration. So in the future of sustainable shrimp farming, if you can do this, you can remove the waste and keep in slot pond while the effluent can be in ETP system. You are going to be very less in risk of the culture because you don't need to be care whatever happened outside in your environment, because your water will be recycled to be used within your own environment system. Pond layer of non-SPF broodstock and live feed without biosecurity program that is not class the PCR, this is screening can be dangerous. So you have to be careful about using this kind of pond layer broodstock or live feed without PCR screening. And of course, the last one, post-COVID pandemic on aquaculture, the demand and supply will be fluctuate. So you have to think about the food safety and of course the product quality, and standardization will be the next customer request from you. So all of you have to be thinking about how can you make the premium shrimp together with your standardization of your farm have to be introduced to make sure that the consumer who consume your shrimp will be safe while environment will be protected. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Prakan. I think you've used the time perfectly. It was a very, very thorough overview. And I think lots of practical information that hopefully our audience today can implement in their own farms. So now we would move to a Q&A session. We've received many questions during the presentation. And I'd like to start off, if I may, Dr. Prakan, with one of the 3 C's, talking about clean seed. So if the customer is using an SPF PLs, how does this influence the chance of having a successful harvest?
Well, only clean seed may be not enough to get you very successful in the performance of the production, as I always mentioned. And I always emphasize that clean seed is just one aspect. Because if you have clean seed, but you just use that clean seed in very dirty environment, dirty water, without biosecurity, of course, you cannot be success with the shrimp farming. If you understand my presentation clearly, and if I can explain you clearly also, you can see that I try to explain you about holistic approach. So clean seed is just one aspect, but I agree with you. Only clean seed cannot make you to be success with your shrimp production and performance, because then still have environmental effect, environmental factor that play role to have your shrimp to be success or not. That is based on your management regime that you have to be implement to your farm.
Okay, very clear. I think you've made a very good case for utilizing this holistic approach and some very strong messages at the end. So then jumping to one of your other C's, the clean pond, we have a question here. What exactly do you mean by clean water? Do you mean a high transparency and a low turbidity, or are there other parameters which you would involve?
Well, I don't have time so much to mention about this clean water because I only have 45 minutes. So just mention about clean water, it just mean the technical term I use the water purification. But mostly of the thing that I show in my slide, you can see that I just mostly show the picture of the water that quite clean and clear. Why I just show that is because we know that if you see in my slide, ESP spore, mostly they are going to be in turbid water. And most of the thing that we found, if you have dissolved organic carbon that's suspended of the dissolved organic carbon on die off of the plankton or overbloom of the plankton, that's going to be the habitat of the bacteria to be just growing in this kind of condition. So when you talk about clean water, it's not just only you make the water to be clean and clear like that, but the main concept, if you can make the water to be clean and clear, it means I think you can be 50% safe from the contaminate from the EHP or the bacteria. But of course, as I explained to you, during your shrimp culture, you still have to feed them. You still have a lot of bacteria overbloom. You still have overbloom of the plankton. So biocontrol by many things like probiotic farming or bioaugmentation is all very important also. And pH of the water, alkalinity, ammonia, dissolved organic carbon, all of these is just the main important thing that is just in the meaning of the clean water that all of you have to be considered to make all of them to be perfect enough for shrimp farming.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Prakan. You touched on the importance of shrimp feeding, and this brings us to the next question. How do functional feeds and feed additives complement your 3C approach at CP?
Well, as I told you, we have not have many time to mention so much about this, but CPF, we running many kind of the feed, functional feed, and we running many immunostimulant, prebiotic and probiotic to our shrimp farming. And of course, I can tell you that they don't, all of them not the silver bullet. It means that only probiotics or only prebiotic and immunostimulant, only they cannot solve the problem. So together with all of this and your understanding how to manage the shrimp pond with holistic approach, all of these together will just be only one thing that you can be hope to solve the problem of the shrimp farming. but just only immunostimulant or prebiotic or even probiotic, I don't think so that they can be a silver bullet for shrimp farming.
At least here, we would also agree with you when it comes to feed additives. We also need to utilize a holistic approach with many different technologies for sure.
Yeah.
Dr. Prakan, the next question, actually, I'd like to combine a couple of questions, if I may. It's relating to the weather. So how does the weather affect the growth of shrimp and the outbreak of disease? And this would link with another question coming from India. What is the reason for white spot syndrome disease in a hot summer?
Well, first question is what is the relationship between the temperature, right?
It just says weather, so yeah, weather, temperature, rainfall perhaps.
The temperature and the diseases, right?
Exactly, the link between the weather and the disease of shrimp, and with a specific case of a white spot during hot temperatures.
Okay, the first question first. As I mentioned to you in the slide, the fluctuation temperature, they play role with 2 or 3 things that you have to understand. The white spot, they don't like the low temperature, and they have many scientific data happen on internet. You can search about the temperature that play role to white spot. If you have very low temperature, they have some scientific data saying that the propagation or the multiplication of the virus is going to be very fast. So when you check the PCR, you can see that from the conventional PCR, the blend of the PCR will be very dense and very dark when you have very low temperature and you have white spot in the environment. So it means that when you have low temperature, white spot is going to be take place. And of course, the problem will be there, especially during the end of the year when you have low temperature. In the opposite way, when you have high temperature, the bacteria love this. That is why in summer season, you gonna have very high temperature going up to be around 28 to 32 or sometimes 34. The water temperature increasing. That is why you can see in one slide of me that the bacteria is going to be really good in this environment, and the propagation of the bacteria, especially the VBO, is going to be increasing. Together with some information in my slide that some trigger like salinity, temperature, they play role to the bacteria to release some virulent factor. So that is why even the bacteria, same thing, in the very high, low temperature, maybe they do nothing with the shrimp, but if they have something trigger them, for example, dissolved organic carbon trigger them, or temperature trigger them, they have some paper mentioned about virulent factor will be changed, and that's why they are going to have some problem of the bacteria to be happen in these VBO bacteria that they used to become a non-pathogenic one. The other question you mentioned about the white spot. Well, from my experience, now white spot not just only, take place only in the winter. You can see I go to many countries, the white spot is everywhere, especially if the community of shrimp is expand. So if you understand that why white spot not just only play low by the temperature is of course one thing, but the most important thing about the white spot is about the carrier and the effluent of the shrimp farm that you are just already drained out. Without the biosecurity strictly to be implemented, you can see that if you input the water from the environment that contaminate with white spot, and a lot of carrier outside, they on carry the white spot, even they are very high temperature, they can transfer the virus into your system. And that is why when you go everywhere right now, whole year you have the viral infection, especially white spot, because if the community of shrimp farm is big and all the farmer don't consider about environment, they just discharge everything outside the system without any ETP or without any disinfection protocol or biosecurity. Of course, the problem going to be happen everywhere, not just only in winter or summer season.
I agree. It's an ever-present threat. Dr. Prakan, I'd like to finish on two specific questions about different diseases. The first one would be on EMS or append. I think it's quite widely accepted that Thailand is quite successful in mitigating or at least managing the EMS, the append threat. Can you tell us perhaps your secrets and maybe what can other regions learn from the successful management in Thailand with the append and EMS specifically?
I think two or three things I already talked in my presentation. One thing is about, of course, the concept that we launched in Thailand about the 3C or the holistic approach on clean seed, clean water, and clean pond. You need to think about the quality of the seed is the most important. If you have good quality of seed from the good quality of the broodstock, and of course, some protocol that you can select them to be tolerant. That is another one aspect that I don't have the time to talk this so much. But I think broodstock is the most important. If you can select the broodstock that have some, selection program for tolerant strain, and then CPF, we run this one also, and we found that some happen in the area of Thailand, and then we challenge them, and then we can see that our seed can tolerant to the happen is around more than 60 to 80%, depend on what kind of happen that we test. So broodstock and seeds is the most important, and of course, the other thing that already emphasized to you, not just only Thailand, many other countries like Philippines, Vietnam, or Malaysia. If you go to every country now that very successful in shrimp farming, all of them have a nursery extension in their farm. They never stock the small PL directly into the pond anymore because they know that when they can make the shrimp to be stronger, bigger, they are going to tolerance to many diseases because not just only happen, ESP also, they have some paper from Galaya, from Mahidol University. If you have the bigger size of the the shrimp or juvenile one, you can tolerate to many kind of the diseases. So I think the juvenile stocking or the extension of nursery is the most important, and it can be the key. So if you go everywhere in Vietnam now, most of the successful farm, they stock shrimp after they pass to the nursery phase. And I think the nursery phase will be the most important in the future.
Okay, some very good advice. Thank you. And the last question, we've had a lot of questions about this actually before and also during the session, is about DIV. So from one of your slides, is it the case that DIV and SHIV are therefore the same pathology? And what are the clinical signs for DIV? And again, maybe it's a similar message, but how would you set up a prevention program against DIV?
Well, let me answer the last one first. The prevention program for DIV, because DIV is viral infection. So to prevent this one, the most important and powerful program to control this one is biosecurity. We used to discuss with our many scientists. We say that if you have a very good protocol to control the white spot, of course you can control the DIV one. It means that you need to strictly your, biosecurity concept. In terms of physically, biologically, and chemically precaution measure. All of them have to be implemented. And if you have this one strength enough or strong enough, I think you can protect the IV. The first question you mentioned about the clinical side. Well, DIV, it just come from decapod, Illidan virus. And I just explained to you that at that time when China got hit by Illidan virus in different period of time, they give the new name of them everywhere. Sometimes they have HSIV, they have CQIV, they have DIV. But now all of them know that all of them is the same virus. So now if you have this Illidan virus or Illidovirus in the decapod animal or crustacean, we are going to call them DIV1. So the characteristic or the clinical sign of this one, when the shrimp is die, they are really look similarly to the append, because shrimp going to die very fast from the report that I see from the China. you can see that the shrimp going to die within not more than 20 days or 30 days. And from the paper, they mentioned that the shrimp going to be like pink color or red color and surface into the water. And then finally, they just sinking to the bottom. And in the next day, you are going to pump out the shrimp. Maybe a lot of shrimp going to pump in the center area and the shrimp toilet area. And the shrimp dye will be pale and look like you have apple bacteria. So one thing I would like to let you know is, if you don't think that you have this DIV or not, I just encourage you or introduce you to just check the PCR or have the PCR plumber in your environment. I think many countries around the world already scared of this one. And I think the most of the country, they have PCR or DIV or HSIV PCR to check whether or not they come to your system already or not. That is the most important. You need to have the protocol of the PCR screening. And the most important is, I found that this one is come from the bush stock that don't clean enough, and then they carry unknown diseases. So if you make sure that you purchase the PL from trustworthy hatchery, and they can talk to them that whether or not they can just certify that they can check HSIV if they are allowed to check in your country, it's going to be a good thing for you to ensure that your PL that you stock is free from HSIV. I think that's one thing is going to be the most important.
Okay, thank you. I think this is a very powerful message to end on. And it's also very relevant to the COVID situation, right? Test, and test some more. And this is the key to prevention and ultimately fixing the situation, regardless of what kind of virus it may be.
Yes, correct.
So, although there's actually still many unanswered questions, which I think is really testament to the importance and the interest on this topic. Unfortunately, our time is up. We've actually overrun a little bit. So therefore, I'd like to end the session. But before I do, Dr. Prakan, on behalf of all of us at BIOMIN, and also I'm sure the audience, we'd like to thank you again for your time, for sharing us your expertise and your experience. And you've given us all plenty to think about. And I'm sure that if we work together, we can work towards a more profitable and a more sustainable shrimp sector. I'd also like to thank the live audience for joining us today and also engaging with our polls and our speaker with all the questions. When we close the session, I'd like to ask just to take another 1 or 2 minutes to complete the online feedback form, just to tell us how we can improve for the future webinars. Looking ahead, we actually have another webinar, the second in our Aquaculture Expert Series, coming up in 2 weeks. This will be on July the 22nd, and it will be on the topic of disease prevention in tilapia through functional feeds. And encourage you, all of your friends, your business partners, your colleagues also to register for this webinar if you will find it useful. So finally, on behalf of BIOMIN, I'd like to wish everybody well, stay safe, stay healthy, and see you very soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.